For centuries, this man has lived a life that cannot die, witnessing the passage of time, but never growing old. Every day he walks through the ruins of fallen empires, seeing lost souls, yet still cannot find the answer for himself. Why has God allowed him to live forever? Why must he wait for something he cannot comprehend? Today, that awakening will come. The answer will be revealed not just to him, but to all who dare face the truth. Death cannot conquer him, for he has found an unseen power that transcends all limits. Watch the full video. God will bless you. Why did God wait for him? In the deep folds of eternity, there exists a silence that cannot be broken. It is in this silence that a man, one who has never known death, has been held. The world moves in its endless dance of time, and yet for this man, time has never been his master, for he stands on the precipice of a mystery, a question that reaches beyond human understanding. Why has God chosen to wait for him when the world so desperately cries out for salvation? For centuries, this man lived as a shadow among the living. He was neither young nor old, his form eternal. His eyes, which once reflected the innocence of youth, now bore the weight of knowledge that transcended the bounds of earthly life. He was not bound by death, nor was he truly alive in the way that those around him experienced life. There was something about him, something that made the people who crossed his path feel as though they had glimpsed into the realm of the divine. And yet, no one could truly understand him. What power kept him from the grave? What divine hand pulled him from the eternal darkness and set him upon this world of fleeting moments? Was he a chosen vessel, one of the rare few hand-picked by the Almighty to witness the unfolding of the ages? Or was he cursed forever, caught in the limbo between life and death, never to know peace or rest? As the years passed, those who encountered him were forced to ask themselves the same question: why did God wait for him? It was in the stillness of night, when the moon hung heavy in the sky, that the man would hear the faint whispers in the wind, a murmur carried across time. "You are here for a reason," they seemed to say. "But what is your purpose?" He did not know, but he felt the weight of it pressing upon him, the burden of waiting. For in his heart there was a deep stirring, an unrest that could not be silenced. Why did God choose him? Why was a being like this, someone not bound to this world, selected to survive through the generations? Everything remained vague, and all he could feel was the weight, an unspoken weight, heavy and inevitable. Each passing day, he felt more keenly the absence of something great. He walked through crowded streets where people rushed by looking at them through eyes that made him feel like a mere spectator in their everyday drama. They didn't know that he walking beside them was unlike any of them. He didn't grow old. He didn't feel the decay of time. He had often asked himself, was he a messenger? Someone sent from another realm, carrying a mission that he could not yet comprehend? Or was he simply a shadow, forever wandering between life and death, never able to find rest as the days turned to nights and the city grew still, with only the flickering streetlights casting long, eerie shadows? He would sometimes feel as if he lived in an unreal world, a darkened place with no way out. This world was so transient, so superficial, but yet he could not separate himself from it. His waiting was not simple. He did not wait like someone hoping for a gift or something to happen. His waiting was deeper, like a constant stream, an unending repetition that never ceased. He waited for understanding, for enlightenment, or perhaps for salvation. He had met many people in his life, and each one of them had their own story. A weary, beautiful woman, a man exhausted by a never-ending war, a child who knew nothing of the world, but carried the innocence of dreams, yet to be shattered. But none of them saw him for what he truly was. They saw him as just another person, just another part of the big picture, while he felt like an outsider, forever left behind. One night, as the darkness surrounded everything, he stood alone on a hilltop, gazing out at the distant stars. Each star was an eternal flame, like the mysteries he could never understand. In the stillness of that late hour, he again heard the whispers from afar, as if a call came from the void, from a place he could never reach. "Are you ready?" That question was not just a greeting. It was a summons, a reminder of his existence in a vast, mysterious universe. Why could he not die? Why did God leave him to live in a world where life and death no longer had boundaries? He had lived through centuries, witnessed countless ups and downs, but never allowed to leave. And then, one day, the waiting would end. The question would be answered, and perhaps in that moment he would know why God chose him, why he stood there, neither part of life nor part of death. He knew that everything would come at the right time, when time no longer ruled all, when the universe turned back on itself, and the truth would be revealed. But for now, he stood there, continuing to wait in the silence of a world that could never understand. The man's existence, bound by neither time nor death, grew heavier with each passing century. It was as though he were suspended in a never-ending dream, walking among the living, while remaining untouched by the frailty of mortality. He had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth of nations, and the decay of civilizations. Yet, through it all, he remained unchanged. Time, a force that swept through every living being, had no claim over him. He often wandered through the ruins of what once was ancient temples, forgotten cities, and abandoned villages. The echoes of voices long silenced seemed to call out to him, as if the very earth itself held secrets meant for him alone. But no matter how many places he explored, no answers came. It was as if the world itself conspired to keep its mysteries hidden from him. And then, one fateful night, as he stood on the edge of a cliff overlooking a vast, desolate valley, he felt it, a presence, a force unlike any he had ever encountered. It was not a physical presence, but a spiritual one, a deep, resonating energy that seemed to hum in the very air. He closed his eyes and listened, allowing the energy to wash over him. "You are not alone," a voice whispered, soft and distant, yet undeniable. The man's heart raced. He had felt this presence before, in the deepest recesses of his soul, but it had always been fleeting, like a shadow that disappeared the moment he tried to grasp it. Now, however, it felt stronger, more tangible. The voice, though faint, seemed to beckon him, drawing him closer to something he could not yet comprehend. For the first time in his long existence, the man felt the stirrings of something greater than himself. He had always believed that his purpose was to observe, to wait for an answer that never came. But now he began to question everything he had known. Perhaps there was a deeper truth, one that had eluded him for all these years. "Why have I been waiting?" he whispered into the night, his voice trembling. "What is my purpose?" The voice did not answer directly, but he felt it an overwhelming sense of understanding, as if the very fabric of the universe had opened up to reveal a hidden truth. He was not merely waiting for some distant event to unfold. He was part of the event itself. The answer, he realized, was within him all along. The truth was not something that could be given. It was something that had to be discovered. And the discovery would not come in the form of knowledge or words, but through experience. The journey he had been on for so long was not just about waiting. It was about learning, about growing, about becoming something more than he had ever imagined. And so, with newfound resolve, the man stepped away from the cliff's edge and turned toward the horizon. For the first time in centuries, he felt a sense of purpose. His waiting had not been in vain. He was not simply a passive observer in the grand scheme of things. He was a participant, a player in a much larger cosmic drama. As he walked into the unknown, the presence that had guided him lingered whispering in his mind. "You are not yet ready, but you will be. Your journey is just beginning." With those words echoing in his ears, the man continued on his path, no longer bound by the uncertainty that had plagued him for so long. He had been waiting for the truth to come to him, but now he understood it was he who had to seek it. And the journey ahead would reveal everything, piece by piece, until the final answer was unveiled. The man's journey was no longer just a meaningless wait. He began to realize that he himself was the key to unlocking all the mysteries, and the path ahead would lead him to the truth that had been hidden for centuries. Each step now was not just movement through space, but an expansion of his soul and mind. He was no longer a shadow quietly passing through time. He was someone beginning to understand his purpose in existence. With each passing day, new questions continued to surface in his mind. Why was he forced to live forever? Why did death never touch him? Was he part of some grand plan, a plan he couldn't yet comprehend? And if so, who created this plan? Was there a force beyond everything he had ever known? He felt that this truth was not only about him, but about humanity, about life and death, about all the mysteries the universe contained. One day, as he walked through a dense, ancient forest, he felt something change in the air. The winds seemed to carry a message, as if they were whispering something that only he could hear. He stopped and closed his eyes, listening. In that moment, he felt it. The presence returned stronger and clearer than ever. "You are close," the voice said in his mind, gentle but full of power. "You will understand it all when you are ready." This presence, though invisible, held tremendous power. He could feel it in every breath he took, in every breeze that passed by. It had guided him for years, and now he knew it would help him complete this journey. But he also realized something. Only when he understood himself, only when he truly accepted his role in this universe, would the truth be revealed. This feeling was no longer about escaping or an uncertain waiting. He had stepped into a different space where time no longer existed in the way he had known it. Everything seemed to merge together between life and death, between the present and the past. The universe was no longer an indifferent, lifeless entity. It was a living, dynamic force, full of energy and interconnectedness, where every being had a specific role. He continued to walk each step, not only moving forward, but also moving deeper within himself, searching for the answers he had not been able to see before. The road ahead was no longer a straight path, but a journey deep into his own being. And he understood that this road was not one he had chosen, but one that fate had laid out for him. By accepting this path, he also began to realize that his life was no longer about waiting for an answer from the outside world. It was about preparing himself, about being ready to face the hidden truth within himself. That was why he could not die, why he had to live forever. Because only when he understood the truth about himself, about this universe, would he be able to complete the mission that had been given to him. On a moonlit night, when the light bathed everything around him, he felt something profoundly shift within his heart. A sense of peace, as if everything in the universe had aligned ready for him to explore. And in that moment, he understood that the truth he sought was not a simple answer, but a process, a long journey to discover who he truly was. The questions that once plagued him no longer bothered him. He no longer sought answers from the outside world. Instead, he found them within his own heart, in the stillness of his soul. And when he was ready, everything would become clear. The truth would not come to him as a shock or a sudden revelation. It would come from within as a deep realization that he would have to discover for himself. The man's steps grew surer with each passing day. It was as if the very earth beneath his feet was guiding him, leading him toward something that lay just beyond his reach, something that had been hidden from him for so long. Every experience, every encounter, every silent moment of contemplation had been a preparation, a lesson that brought him closer to the truth. And now the time had come. He found himself standing at the edge of a vast, ancient temple, its stone walls weathered by centuries of neglect, but still standing tall, a testament to something far greater than what the eye could see. The air around the temple felt different, charged with an energy that seemed to vibrate in the very air. He could feel it deep within his bones, a strange sense of familiarity, mixed with a foreboding unease. He had been here before, not physically, but in a deeper spiritual sense. For a moment, he hesitated. The temple was a symbol of something vast, something old. And in that moment, he knew that crossing its threshold would be more than just stepping into a new place. It would be stepping into his own soul, into the deepest parts of himself that he had never dared to explore. With a deep breath, he stepped forward. As his foot made contact with the ancient stone, a rush of energy surged through him. It was like a flood of knowledge, memories, and sensations all rushing into his mind at once. The temple was not just a building. It was a portal, a gateway to a truth he had been seeking his entire existence. The walls, though cracked and crumbling, seemed to pulse with life, as if the temple itself were alive, waiting for him to uncover its secrets. The voice that had guided him all these years echoed in his mind once more. This is it. The time has come to understand. With every step deeper into the temple, the man could feel the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds growing thinner. It was as if the boundaries between life and death, between the known and the unknown, were beginning to blur. The darkness around him was no longer oppressive. It felt like a blanket, comforting and full of promise. The man reached the heart of the temple, where a massive altar stood, carved from stone and covered in ancient symbols he had never seen before. There, standing before the altar, he felt a presence unlike anything he had ever known. It was as though the very essence of the universe was standing beside him, watching him, waiting for him to take the final step. "Why have you waited?" the voice asked, now more present than ever, as if it were coming from within him. The question struck him deeply, as though it were not just directed at him, but at the very essence of his existence. He had spent so long searching for answers, waiting for someone to reveal the truth to him. But now, in this sacred space, the question was clear. It was not a question of why he had waited. It was a question of why he had been chosen to wait. Why had the universe, with all its complexity and mystery, kept him alive? Kept him in this endless state of limbo? The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. The truth was not something that could be given to him. It was something that had to be earned. His waiting had not been in vain. It was a test, a trial that would lead him to a revelation greater than anything he could have imagined. The universe had not kept him alive to punish him. It had kept him alive to prepare him. For the truth that would be revealed to him was not just for his understanding. It was for the world itself. He was a key, a vessel, and the knowledge he would gain would be a gift not only for himself, but for all of creation. With that understanding, the temple's walls seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. The symbols on the altar shifting and changing, revealing something ancient, something sacred. The man reached out his fingers, brushing the stone surface, and in that moment, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. He understood. He had been chosen, not because he was special, but because he was part of something much greater. He was a link in the chain, a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, between the mortal and the divine. The answers he sought had always been within him, and the temple, the voice, and the journey had all been the catalysts for his awakening. And now, standing at the altar, he felt it. The truth that had eluded him for so long was now his to claim. He was not just a man living in limbo. He was a messenger, a chosen vessel with a mission to bring balance to a world that had long lost its way. The waiting had been necessary. The waiting had prepared him for this very moment. With the truth now clear in his mind and soul, he took a deep breath, ready to step into the next phase of his journey. The man who never died had finally come to understand why he had waited and what he was meant to do. The revelation that surged through the man's soul was both a relief and a burden. He had sought the truth for so long, believing it would come as a clear, unmistakable answer. But now, standing at the heart of the ancient temple, he realized that the truth was not something that could be easily understood with a simple glance or a fleeting moment of clarity. It was something deeper, something far more intricate, woven into the very fabric of his existence. He stepped away from the altar, the glowing symbols fading as the walls returned to their original state of decay. But inside him, everything had shifted. His purpose, long obscured by the fog of uncertainty, had been laid bare. The truth was not an external force waiting to be discovered. It was within him, always had been. He was not merely a passive observer of the world around him. He was an active participant in the grand design of the universe. As he walked through the temple's corridors, he could feel a sense of connection to everything around him. The walls, the air, the earth beneath his feet, everything pulsed with life. He was no longer an outsider looking in. He was a part of the intricate web of existence, a thread woven into the vast tapestry of the cosmos. His mind raced with the enormity of it all. The weight, the years of silence and stillness had not been for nothing. It had been a time of preparation, a time to mold him into the being he needed to be in order to fulfill his purpose. The waiting had not been a punishment. It had been a gift, a time for him to grow to understand and to come into alignment with the universe itself. He had often wondered why he had been chosen, why he had been made to wait. Now he understood. His waiting had given him the time to become something greater than he had ever imagined. He was not a simple mortal man caught in the grip of time and death. He was something more, something that transcended both time and death. The air around him seemed to grow heavier with each step, as though the very atmosphere was charged with a new energy, a new potential. He felt it inside him, a stirring deep in his soul, a call to action. It was time for him to leave the temple, to step out into the world, and fulfill the role he had been born to play. The universe had waited for him to reach this point, and now it was his turn to act. But as he made his way toward the temple's entrance, he stopped. The question lingered in his mind. What now? What was he meant to do with the truth he had uncovered? The answer came to him not in words, but in a deep, inner knowing. He was meant to lead. For centuries, he had observed the world, watched as it spiraled into chaos, as humanity struggled to find its way. He had been waiting, watching, preparing for this very moment. Now that he understood his purpose, now that he knew what he had to do, there was no turning back. The man who never died was no longer just a passive observer. He was a beacon, a guide, a force of change. The waiting had ended, and the time for action had come. As he stepped out of the temple and into the world beyond, he felt the weight of his new purpose settle upon him. It was not a burden, it was a calling that would take him across the earth to the farthest reaches of the world, to those who needed him most. He was a messenger of hope, a bringer of balance in a world that had lost its way. The winds of change were stirring, and the man who had waited for so long was finally ready to fulfill his role. He was no longer the man who never died. He was the man who had come to awaken the world. And with that realization, he stepped into the unknown, ready to bring the truth he had discovered to those who would listen. The journey of the man was no longer just a series of steps through space and time. It had become an inner journey where everything within him had changed. The questions, the doubts had gradually been replaced by a deeper understanding of the nature of this universe. He no longer merely lived in this world. He had become a part of it, integrated with it, and he felt more connected than ever to his role in the grand design of the cosmos. Along with this change, he realized that an even greater task awaited him, a task he had not anticipated. The universe had prepared him step by step to bring him to this moment. And now he knew that the final truth would be revealed when he confronted both himself and the world. He left the sacred land of the temple where ancient wisdom had left its mark. Walking through the dark night under the light of the stars, he felt a powerful presence surrounding him. It was as though the stars, the paths of the universe, and everything he saw were guiding him toward a destination he could not yet foresee. Once again, he felt the presence that had silently watched over him all this time. It was not a sound or a shape, but a sensation, a feeling, as if someone was always beside him, always guiding, always understanding every fear and doubt in his heart. "You are ready," the voice whispered in his mind this time, not a question, but a statement. Walking on, he began to realize that the goal was not to seek a specific destination, but to complete himself, to integrate with what he had discovered. He no longer needed to change the world. He needed to change himself, to understand more about his own role, about how he could become a catalyst for transformation. He understood that his steps were no longer just personal. They were a connection to everything around him, an integration into the vast universe that he still did not fully comprehend. It was an awakening, not just of him, but of the world, of all those living in the shadows of ignorance. Day by day, he felt no longer alone. The feeling of isolation had faded, replaced by an invisible bond between him and everyone he encountered. The people he once considered strangers now seemed like companions, each carrying their own story, their own lesson. And when they met him, a part of them began to change as well. He felt the awakening in every person he met, as if small flames were igniting in the darkness. Every encounter was an opportunity to light up the souls that had lost their way. And what he carried within him was not just personal knowledge. It was a message, a light for those who were willing to see. The truth was not something that could be conveyed simply through words or theories. It was an experience, an awakening that each person must undergo for themselves. And he was chosen to convey it not through lectures or instructions, but through his actions and presence. As he continued his journey, he realized that this world, though filled with challenges and trials, always contained opportunities. Opportunities to change, to awaken, to realize the truth within oneself. And that had become his mission, not just to find the truth, but to help others find it within themselves. As the man continued his journey, the weight of his newfound purpose grew heavier. Every step he took, every person he met, reinforced the clarity of his mission. The world around him, once a chaotic mix of fleeting moments and disconnected lives, now felt like a symphony, each note part of a grand divine design. He was no longer an outsider. He was a thread woven into the fabric of existence itself, and every encounter, every conversation held meaning beyond the surface. The world was awakening, and he was a part of that awakening. Yet despite the growth he had experienced, there was still a gnawing feeling inside him. Was he truly ready? Had he fully embraced the truth? The journey had been long, but in many ways it felt like the beginning. The question of why he had been chosen still lingered in his heart. Why was he the one who had been given this knowledge, this burden, this light? One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky With shades of gold and crimson, the man found himself standing at the edge of a quiet village. The soft murmurs of life, the laughter of children, the quiet conversations of elders reached his ears. There was something so peaceful about this place, and yet he could feel the darkness that clung to the hearts of those who lived there. It was the same darkness that had once enveloped him, the same emptiness that had kept him waiting for so long. He knew that he had to do something about it. He had to share what he had learned, not with words, but with actions. He had to show them that there was a way out of the shadows, a path leading to the light that he had discovered within himself. But how? How could he, a single man, bring light to so many? The answer came to him in a quiet, almost imperceptible moment. The light did not come from the outside. It was not a flame that could be handed to others. It was an inner awakening, a recognition of the divine spark within each soul. And that spark, once recognized, would grow and spread like wildfire. He understood then that his mission was not to force change, but to guide others toward their own awakening. He was not meant to be their savior, but their mirror. Through his actions, his presence, and his example, they would see the light within themselves. That was the true meaning of his purpose. With this understanding, the man walked into the village, his heart open, his mind clear. He did not speak of grand ideas or lofty goals. He simply lived his truth. He smiled at the children as they played the spoke with the elders, as they shared their wisdom and helped where help was needed. He did not seek to be admired or celebrated. His only goal was to be present, to be a living testament to the truth he had discovered. And slowly, as the days passed, something began to shift. The villagers who had once been distant and disconnected began to warm to him. They began to see something in his eyes, something that drew them closer. It was not his words, but the energy that radiated from him, the quiet certainty, the calm presence. In his silence, they saw the answers to their own unspoken questions. One by one, they started to awaken, to remember the light within themselves. The darkness that had once clouded their hearts began to dissipate. And as it did, the man realized that his mission was not about grand gestures or dramatic transformations. It was about simple acts of love, kindness, and presence. It was about being the light that others needed to see in order to find their own. As the man sat on a hill overlooking the village, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. His purpose had been fulfilled, not in the way he had expected, but in a way far deeper than he could have imagined. He had not just been waiting for the truth to come to him. He had been waiting for the world to be ready to receive it. And now, the time had come. The world was awakening, and the man who had never died had finally found his place within it. He was no longer just a traveler, a seeker. He was a beacon, a guide for those who were ready to see the truth within themselves. The journey had come full circle, and he knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. As the man continued his journey, something new began to unfold. The awakening was not just a personal process, but a global one where each person started to realize the boundless possibilities within themselves. He was no longer merely the one bringing light to the world. He had become the light, becoming the guide for lost souls to reconnect with their divine essence. What he had gone through had changed him forever. The deeper he journeyed, the more he realized that awakening was not only an awareness of the outer world, but also a profound understanding of his own nature. He had not only discovered his purpose, but he also began to understand more clearly the meaning of sacrifice. The sacrifice that he once saw as a burden had now become an inseparable part of his transformation. The pain and trials he had endured were no longer meaningless struggles. They were necessary steps, invaluable lessons that helped him refine his soul and expand his understanding. One morning, as the sun rose, its light cast upon the small houses of the village. He stood watching a familiar sight, the villagers, the people he had met, beginning to change. They were no longer the lonely people trapped in anxiety and doubt. Now they had begun to see the light within themselves, a light they had never noticed before. He didn't speak much, didn't ask anything from them, but through each action, each gesture of his, they began to change. The elderly smiled, more the children laughed brightly, and the young men were no longer sunk in sadness or negative thoughts. They began to realize that they were not victims of their circumstances, but creators of their own reality. And they understood that they could change everything if only they dared to awaken and open their hearts. The man was no longer just a guide. He had become a symbol of sacrifice, of a life not seeking personal gain, but a life of giving a life for the collective good. He understood that sacrifice was not loss, but an exchange of great value, where every loss brought about a growth, a deeper awakening. Although he had helped many, he knew that his journey was far from over. Each awakening of another opened a new chapter in his life. His sacrifice was not only for one person or one small community. It was for all of humanity, for anyone who could realize that they no longer had to live in the darkness of ignorance and fear. The man who never died was not seeking glory or adoration. He only wanted one thing: to see the world awaken, to see each person rediscover the light within themselves, just as he had found it. With this sacrifice, he had not only saved himself, but also saved the lost souls in the world. Death could no longer harm him because he had found a higher life, a life not limited by time or death. He had lived for a purpose greater than himself, and that was the path leading to eternal liberation. The man stood at the edge of a new horizon, his heart filled with a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had taken him through unimaginable trials, through endless moments of waiting and questioning. But now, standing at this precipice, he understood that every step had led him here to this very moment. He had found the truth not in the world outside, but within himself. He had learned that the greatest awakening came not from the discovery of external knowledge, but from the recognition of the divine spark that had always existed within him. The light he had been searching for, the truth he had been waiting for, was not something that could be found or given. It was something that had to be awakened. It was within every living soul, a latent power waiting to be realized. And now that he understood this, he knew that his purpose was far greater than he had ever imagined. His role was not just to guide, but to ignite that spark in others, to help them see the divine light within themselves. He was not their savior, but a mirror, a reflection of their own potential, their own truth. By being the light, he could help others awaken to their own truth, and together they would rise. The world around him was changing. The darkness that had once overshadowed it was beginning to lift slowly, but surely, as more and more people began to wake up to their own potential. The man felt the shift, felt the energy of the earth stirring, as if the very planet itself was coming alive, responding to the collective awakening of its inhabitants. But he also knew that the journey was far from over. There would always be more souls to awaken, more hearts to guide. The path was endless, for the process of awakening was a continual one. There was no final destination, only an eternal unfolding. As the sun rose on the horizon, casting its first rays of light upon the world, the man understood that the dawn he had been waiting for was not just a single moment, but the beginning of a new era. It was the dawn of a new consciousness, a new way of being, where all beings could live in harmony with the divine truth within them. He had once asked himself why he had been chosen to walk this path. Now he knew. He was not chosen because he was special, but because he was a part of a much larger plan. He was a link in a chain, a small piece in the vast puzzle of the universe, and his role was to help others see their own place in the grand design. With this understanding, the man smiled, feeling at peace for the first time in his long existence. He had come to understand that his journey had never been about seeking external answers or achieving personal glory. It had been about awakening to the truth within himself and helping others do the same. It had been about the eternal cycle of growth, transformation, and enlightenment. And as he stepped forward into the new day, the man who never died knew that he was no longer bound by time or death. He was free to continue his journey, to guide, to awaken, and to help the world embrace its own light. The dawn of the new era had arrived, and it would continue to rise forever, unfolding, forever awakening. And so the answer has been revealed, not only for that man, but for all of us. Awakening, liberation, and divine light have arrived as long as we are ready to open our hearts and receive it. Remember, every journey is a preparation to discover ourselves and this infinite universe. Thank you for watching the full video. God will always be with you and bless you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to spread the light to others.